This is Radio Nepal. I'm Kaushal Ghimire with the news. The headlines first. Prime Minister Pushpakamal Dahal Prachanda to answer questions raised by the MPs in House meeting today. National Human Rights Commission expresses concerns over fake Putney's refugee scam and government's attempts to amend criminal code. And Quad Summit set for next week in Sydney, Australia, postponed after US pulls out. Now the news in detail. The meeting of the House of Representatives has been called for 11 this morning. Prime Minister Pushpakamal Dahal Prachanda is scheduled to answer the questions raised by the MPs in today's House meeting. The District Court, Kathmandu, has allowed the police to keep the 14 individuals arrested in the fake Putney's refugee scam in custody for additional 3 days and continue the investigation. Meanwhile, the National Human Rights Commission has said its attention has been drawn towards the fake Putney's refugee scam and the government's attempts to amend criminal code in a bid to grant amnesty to culprits facing criminal cases. Organizing a press conference at its central office in Lalitpur yesterday, the Commission expressed its concern on the government's preparation to amend the code to withdraw the cases of culprits involved in serious crimes in the name of bringing them into mainstream politics. Talking to journalists, National Human Rights Commission Chairperson Tab Bahadur Magar said if the criminal code was amended as being prepared by the government, culprits linked to serious crimes including murder, torture, sexual violence, abduction and hostage-taking would get amnesty. He also demanded the government carry out fair investigations into the fake Putney's refugee scam and take stringent action against the culprits. Meanwhile, talking to the representatives of Human Rights and Peace Society yesterday, Deputy Prime Minister and Home Minister Narayan Kaji Shrestha reiterated the government's commitment to book all the culprits involved in the fake Putney's refugee scam. Visiting Assistant Minister for Foreign Affairs of Australia, Tim Watts, yesterday paid a courtesy call on Prime Minister Pushpakamal Dahal Prachanda. The Prime Minister's Secretariat said during the meeting held at the Prime Minister's official residence in Balwatar, matters relating to bilateral interest were discussed. On the occasion, Prime Minister Dahal expected continuous support from the Government of Australia to Nepal's development and prosperity. He also inquired about the status and issues of Nepali students in Australia. The Prime Minister also extended an invitation to his Australian counterpart for a visit to Nepal. The Australian Assistant Minister assured of continuous support from Australia to Nepal's development and prosperity campaign. Minister for Communication and Information Technology, Rekha Sharma, has urged the service providers and regulators to make the ICT-related services accessible and affordable for all, enhancing their quality. Addressing the inaugural function of the Spectrum Management Conference organized by the Nepal Telecom Authority yesterday, Communication Minister Sharma said the government was vigorously working to minimize digital divide. The Communication Minister added that the conference should also hold serious discussion on why the revenue from the IT sector was decreasing despite its increasing usage. The Department of Transport Management has decreased the fare of passenger and goods carrier vehicles under the inter-province public transport after the diesel price came down. Issuing a notice yesterday, the department informed that the fare of passenger transport vehicles has been reduced by 3.20%. Similarly, the fare of goods carrier vehicles operated in the hilly route has been decreased by 4.19% and that of the goods carrier vehicles operated in Tharai routes by 4.65%. Russia has asked for detailed proposals for various 13 projects from the Nepal government to extend cooperation. During a meeting between National Assembly Chair Ganesh Prasad Timilsina and his Russian counterpart, Russia showed interest in 13 different projects. In proposed call, Russia has asked to send detailed project proposals on electric highway, electric railway, highways, construction of cancer hospital for children, and increasing scholarship quotas for Nepali students for studying in Moscow. You're listening to Radio Nepal's 8 a.m. English News Bulletin. Time for a short break now.
भाउजू दर्शन
भाग्यमानी बाबु राम्ररी आइपुग्नु भयो नि
हजुर राम्ररी पुगे उ चाहिँ मेरो कलेजको बेस्ट फ्रेन्ड
नमस्ते भाउजू
नमस्ते आउनु न भित्रै
हुन्छ भाउजू
अनि दादा त अफिस गइसक्नु भयो होला है
उहाँ त बिहानै हो हुन्छ तपाईहरु फ्रेश हुँदै गर्नु न म खाना तयार गर्दै गर्छु है
हस् हस् भाउजू
ओए वाइफाई होला नि पासवर्ड माग्न
हे त पनि एनटीसी को सस्तो डे प्याक छदैछ नि
ए हो र
एनटीसी को डे प्याक लिन *1415# डायल गर्न
Nepal Telecom राष्ट्रको संचार.
You're listening to Radio Nepal's 8 a.m. English News Bulletin. Now on to some international updates. A summit of the Quad countries scheduled to be held in Sydney, Australia next week will be postponed after U.S. President Joe Biden pulled out because of date-sealing negotiations in Washington. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said the leaders of Australia, India, Japan and the United States will instead meet at the Group of 7 summit in Japan this weekend. U.S. President Biden cancelled a trip to Sydney on the second leg of his upcoming Asia-Pacific trip, which was also to have included a visit to the Papua New Guinea. British charity Oxfam says rich G7 nations owe poor ones an estimated $13 trillion in unpaid development aid as well as support in the fight against climate change. The organization said that instead of fulfilling their obligations, the international group of 7 nations and their banks are demanding debt repayments of $232 million per day. Oxfam's interim executive director Amitabh Beher said in a statement that wealthy G7 countries like to cast themselves as saviors, but what they are doing is operating a double deadly standard. Al Jazeera quotes the charity as saying that developed countries promised in 2009 to transfer $100 billion annually between 2020 and 2025 to vulnerable states hit by increasingly severe climate-linked impacts and disasters, but the target was never met. Now, the general weather forecast for the country for today, according to the Meteorological Forecasting Division. The weather will be partly cloudy in Kosi province along with the hilly regions of the rest of the country, and it will also be, the weather will be mainly fair in the rest of the country. Light rain with thunder and lightning is also likely to occur at a few places of Kosi province, Baghmati province and Gandaki province. With this, we have almost come to the end of this news bulletin, but before wrapping up, the headlines once again. Prime Minister Pushpakamal Dahal Prachanda to answer questions raised by the MPs in House meeting today. National Human Rights Commission expresses concerns over fake Bhutanese refugee scam and government's attempts to amend criminal code. And Quad Summit set for next week in Sydney, Australia, postponed after US pulls out. Well, that's all the news we have for this bulletin. Our next bulletin in English will be at 2 in the afternoon. You can also listen to us online at our website, www.onlineradionepal.gov.np. Keep listening to Radio Nepal and have a good day.